Fear and greed. More fear than greed, but be absolutely clear that the greed is what got us here. We'll talk about it. Coronavirus, COVID-19, call it whatever name you want to call it. We now have over 10,000 deaths, 250,000 confirmed cases, and we're barely getting up to par with testing here in the U.S. The global margin call continues. Last week, I talked socialism coming to America. We have some senators that are bordering on treason, and we're going to talk about them. Biggest weekly gain since 2008, and you guessed it, the dollar, something we've been talking about for over a year now. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with my co-host, the quarantined, the corona COVID-free, the insightful, the witty, the intelligent, Mr. Nick Hodge. This is episode 62 of Bizarro World. Nick, first and foremost, how are you and your family doing?
Well, you said COVID-free. I hope that's the case. I think I'm probably still within the incubation period, but no one here is showing any signs or symptoms. Everyone is healthy and in good spirits, and I think like everyone else, just taking it day by day, watching the numbers, seeing all the various studies and reports on infection rates and death rates, etc., learning about various vaccines and treatments that are in play, and sort of contemplating all the different scenarios in our mind, and continually running through our mental and physical checklists of things we can do to give us more peace of mind, as it's certainly uncertain right now.
I think that's
How about you?
I am well. I think that your point is well taken. I know, just on a personal level, all of my favorite things outside of my wife and kids, which obviously I'm thankful for. We're healthy, we're great. But all of my favorite things that are kind of outlets for myself, right? The movies, the gym, things of that nature are completely shut down here in Texas, right? We finally got a declaration of emergency from the governor, which kind of followed the mayor's advice in Austin and here in Round Rock. But, everybody's rightfully staying away and being responsible. And I back to your point, I think it's incredibly important that people are healthy mentally as well as physically. It's going to be critical, I think, because I don't believe that this is something that is just about 14 days. I think they're going to slow walk us towards 2 months, maybe 2.5 months. Initially, I had hoped that we were better prepared in the way of testing so that we could identify and quarantine the segment of the population that was sick and vulnerable. That obviously was not the case. We've learned now that the NBA, the National Basketball Association, was reacting to this in mid-January, while I have a president going on national TV saying that until last month, he had never heard about this. We know that's unequivocally false. This is not a partisan point that I'm trying to make. It is a fact. And so the response has been absolutely botched. It absolutely made my blood boil to see tens of thousands, not thousands, tens of thousands of young people on South Padre Island here in Texas for spring break at the beach, and in Florida, where, of course, now in Florida, cases are starting to just surge, right? Not surprisingly. And so, I say all that to say that there's been a lack of coordination from the top on down here in the U.S. that I hope when this is all said and done, is held to account. And I'm not talking just about elections. I'm talking about a complete paradigm shift in the way that we coordinate. I mentioned at the top that, we had 10,000 cases now, deaths worldwide, and 246,000 cases. This speaks to the velocity of everything right now. Global cases now, 20 minutes later, are more than 265,000. And according to CNBC, global deaths are now 11,147. Here in the U.S., we have at least 16,000 cases with 210 deaths. And for those of you on Twitter that keep tweeting. And I know Twitter isn't the real world and it's probably a bot, but for the bots or the idiots on Twitter that keep tweeting, this isn't as serious as a flu, everybody's overreacting. My question is a simple one. What's the number for you people that would make you take this seriously? Because the few times that I've had to go to the store and I'm seeing, senior citizens and the most vulnerable part of our population that don't have friends or family to be able to go to the store for them, when I see them out there, I can't help but think that we are doing such a disservice for that segment of our population that we really as a community should be looking out for. And I know it's not just the 70 and over crowd that is being affected severely in some cases. And we'll talk about the case from PDAC that emerged this week. But it's not just that segment of our population, but they are the most vulnerable. Those are just the facts thus far. The largest sample size is Italy and China, and that's what the numbers tell us. So for everyone out there that's not taking this seriously, if all you have to do is stay home, we're not asking you to storm the beach. We're not asking you to go on a hunger strike. All we're asking is show some discretion and some responsibility to your neighbor. Even if you feel great, please, by all means, find a way to responsibly distance socially so that we give the most vulnerable parts of our population a fighting chance. Any thoughts on that,
All good points, Gerardo. I had to take out my notebook because you were saying so much. I had to write down how I wanted to respond, and I didn't get everything written down. But my blood, too, was boiling this morning, especially because, and you and I have talked about it here, and I've written about it, we definitely knew about this since January. And I think we also knew it was going to be longer than a 2-week quarantine. And so... a couple of points. I think everyone is fine. Most people are fine with a 2-week quarantine if we know why we're quarantining for 2 weeks and we know what the end game is at the end of those 2 weeks. Now you've got Dr. Fauci on TV talking about a month or more, right? And so people are going to start to increasingly lose it. I've already seen shootings in rural areas, police talking about increased reports of domestic violence as people are home, people not getting the food they need, senior citizens, and people below the poverty line, especially with kids. And so the infrastructure isn't in place to give those people the support they need in the time frame that all this has happened, which is very quickly. Especially when there's no tests being given, right? We don't know what this quarantine is for, and we don't know if we're having an impact because we're not getting any tests done to know if we're limiting the spread. So there has to be increased testing for sure, and we need to know where the clusters are, right? I've been reading a lot about clusters, and we need to get them quarantined and locked down, and we need to know where it's not spreading as fast. And the only way to do that is with tests, and you're starting to see now private corporations, as we've been saying was going to happen, step up and are putting out thousands of tests. Hopefully we get tens of thousands and more because the per capita rate of testing in the U.S. continues to be abysmal and well below that of that being done by other developed nations. You talked about the people or the bots on Twitter that are downplaying this, and I've read a lot of those takes as well, talking about the infection and death rate. Well, not the infection rate because a lot of people got it, but the death rate on the Princess cruise ship, which was an isolated case and where the population skewed elder 60 because we know older people take cruises. And so it was an older population, and yet the death rate was below what they're seeing or saw in China. And I'm seeing a lot of people writing that the response has been over dramatic and is going to have too severe of implications on the economy relative to the risk of the virus. I don't know the answer to that. I'm just, I wrote about it yesterday. Like Mr. Dine says, don't think, look, you got to just take it day by day. You're not the one making the decisions. You have to respond to what's happening because you're not in control, right? So all those things, but certainly the response was botched, and the paradigm shift you talk about, I could just see it being ushered in day by day. And that's what's really making me hopeful about the virus, because the virus is going to usher in a lot of things. Yes, it's going to usher in a recession. Yes, it's going to usher in significantly higher unemployment. Yes, it's going to usher in significantly lower valuations. But you're also going to see it shine a light on a lot of things that are just going to become crystal clear that were hypocritical before. We've talked about examples. I'm not going to recite them again, but new ones I'm seeing are like, and this is a small one, but like alcohol delivery in the Bible Belt is suddenly okay when, 2 weeks ago, it's like morally bad. You can't, for some reason, you can't deliver alcohol. And that's just a small one, all the way up to, I'm going to go right to the senators now, the freaking senators that got caught dumping stock in when they knew about this in private reports in January, are telling a story publicly that the threat is not severe, but privately, behind closed doors, selling, banking, in some cases, millions of dollars in gains. Yes. While pivoting and positioning for the stay-at-home lockdown situation they knew was about to unfold by buying certain stocks like telecommuting stocks that have gone up, etc. And so they clearly knew. I don't care if it was illegal or not. It's unethical. It's immoral. You said borders on treasonous. Certainly now with the blood is on their hands. I mean, the country wasn't prepared and they were worried about profiteering. And so, with all the circuses shut down, right, with no NBA and no NHL and no spring baseball and no ESPN to divert everybody's attention and everyone glued to the news, this has spread like wildfire very quickly. It was like the number 3 trend within 15 minutes of me seeing it on Twitter yesterday. And there's numerous examples of things that the virus are going to highlight like that. And so this is that fourth turning, folks. I don't want to beat that dead horse too much, but the virus is definitely speeding it along.
Absolutely. There was a lot there. Let's talk numbers for a bit. The Dow dropped more than 17% this week after being up, 400 points here on Friday. It ended up closing nearly 1,000 points. This is, again, the biggest 1 week fall since October of 2008. The dollar, again, surged. It's flirting with 103, the dollar index, the biggest surge since 2008. The S&P down 13% for the week. The NASDAQ fell 12.6%. I mean, I could go on and on. Let's talk response a little more. California, Governor Newsom there, he has ordered not a mandatory, but a very strongly worded statewide lockdown for non-essential employees. Similar actions being taken by the governor in New York. The city of New Jersey, or the state of New Jersey, is also doing a similar rollout. So we're starting to see regions take this a lot more seriously than other regions, which begs the question to me. Why don't we do what Bill Ackman, the hedge fund manager that went on CNBC earlier this week, said, which made perfect sense to me? Why don't we just shut it down for 30 days? Everywhere. And then it's a 30-day problem,
what do you mean?
Right? Shut everything down.
What do you mean shut it?
Home quarantines for non-essential personnel. If you're not a first responder, a nurse, a doctor, everybody stay home for 30 days. Why are we doing this city by city, state by state, where one county, for example, can be out and about shopping at, TJ Maxx, while another county can't go out at all, prolonging eventually the stamping out of this virus? Why not just shut it all down?
I'm not a disaster planner, but if it's going to be a nationwide effort, then it should be a nationwide effort. I have to agree. I thought you were going to ask about shutting down the markets and him crying about other things, which I didn't necessarily agree with. But a 30-day shutdown, if it's going to be in sync, makes a little bit of sense to me. Again, I'm not an epidemiologist. I don't know. Like I say, I'm taking it personally day by day. But you have to assume this thing's just going to spread as people continue to move around. Like you said, I was reading reports this morning at where was it? Out of Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina, like malls packed, people out and about. And so If you're going to try to stomp it out, you got to draw a line in the sand. I think as Americans, and this is something else we've talked about, we don't like to be told what to do. The reason China was able to stomp it out, as we've talked about, was through an authoritarian response. And I'm not sure how much people would cooperate in the United States. I certainly would be willing to, but you'd have to put it out there and see. And I don't think that when this virus hit, clearly we weren't prepared for it. We didn't have enough surgical masks, and we certainly didn't have the political cohesion to tackle it.
And we still don't. Let's be clear about that. We still don't have the political cohesion or a mask or supplies or test. Here in Texas, there, our governor's bragging about being able to test, over 1,000 people by the end of the week. I mean, that's great for those 1,000 people. There's millions of people in Texas, tens of millions of people. So that's how behind the curve we are right now. And it's frustrating as all hell. You mentioned the senators that were selling into a rally, two, after a classified meeting. I know there's been a complaint filed by the DOJ. I hope it leads somewhere. And we'll see what that is. Their non-essential travel from Canada and Mexico is also now shut down. It's interesting to me that we're thinking twice about how and what non-essential workers, what that means, right? All of a sudden, the farmers, the truck drivers, grocery store workers, clerks, they seem pretty damn essential right now.
Yeah, and I think you're going to get an overhaul in the restaurant industry where they look at that and things are changed. We talked about it with Darden restaurants, but where you get more of a shift toward hourly based compensation and more safety nets, because clearly that industry is going to take a whack. I was reading statistics from OpenTable, the reservation website, this week, saying that year over year, some days this week, the reservations were down in some cases over 90% at some restaurants. And so I really think you're going to see shifts brought about by this virus for sure.
Let's talk about the coordinated response that we expected. The Fed said it would enhance the permanent U.S. dollar liquidity swap line with basically everyone but China, right? It's doing it with the Bank of Canada, the Bank of England, Bank of Japan, the ECB, who I thought was slow to react and got its ass handed to it so badly that it had to conduct an emergency meeting in the middle of the week, pledging to buy, I believe, $750 billion of bonds because of a failed auction in Germany where there simply was zero bid. I've been saying that there's going to be wipeouts in the banking sector there. I think that bond market's going to get wiped out, and I think this is the ECB's last salvo there. We can't ignore the dollar, Nick. You and I have been saying this for years, that everybody that was, wishing that the dollar would die, it'll happen maybe in a few years' time. It's definitely headed in the direction of all currencies, but man, this is not that time. And it wouldn't surprise me to see a slight pullback with, the $1 trillion repos that we're doing on a daily basis now. We'll get into some of the other policy actions that have been taken. But again, if you see a slight pullback, people, and you're trading the dollar, be very, very careful. Because I think the dollar is going to wipe a lot of companies and some countries out, and their reset is coming before the US's is.
Well, cash has been king. It's been the asset class that has not gone down. Cash is always par, right? And so whether you've been buying UUP or you've been taking cash out of the ATM every day or you've been sitting on cash all along, cash has been the winner, and it's going to continue to be, as I've heard on Bloomberg 100 times in the past 72 hours, the cleanest dirty shirt, as we've been saying for years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk about the fact that the Fed now is buying everything. I mean, municipal debt, they're buying mortgage treasuries. They're going to be dipping their toes in corporate bond markets. I think mortgage securities, I joked earlier, but I wasn't joking. I went away to get some notes together, and it was $107 billion a day. And when I came back from getting my notes together, there was another breaking news segment on CNBC that said it was now 122 billion in mortgage securities. I will say this, I was encouraged by the response in the 10-year. I've said that the bond market is broken, the treasury market, there were severe dislocations there that despite all the Fed's pounding of its chest was having zero effect on that 10-year. I mean, the 10-year I think got as high as 119. I believe it closed. Right. Yeah, I think it closed right around, and I'm freestyling here, but I think it closed right around the 0.90 level, 0.90 level, right under 1%. So that was encouraging. That move was pretty substantial. Gold also held up pretty well. I know a lot of people are wondering what gold is doing. I'm actually encouraged by the price action. I mean, gold closed at 1487 with the dollar index at damn near 103. I think it's setting up for a rally higher. Any thoughts on the gold price, Nick?
No, I'm encouraged as well. I was doing year-to-date analysis the other day, which is ugly for a lot of things. You know, S&P down 30-35%.
My portfolio.
Yeah, no doubt. Similar. But the energy sector down 50 or 60%. And then you look at gold, quote unquote, only down 3% year to date. So it's doing what it's supposed to do. You know, everybody's making the 2008 analogy, which I've also made, where it was sold off with everything else as people needed to raise cash and as funds needed to delever. I haven't heard a lot talked about the gross and net exposure, where people have to reduce their levered exposure, right, and sell indiscriminately, or just books being sold as people bail out. And so you saw the volatility of the gold price rise significantly. And gold is going to do what gold is going to do. It went on to outperform for 3 years in after 2008, and I think we're setting up for that again. At the price it's at now, a lot of things work once the volatility settles back down, and a lot of the big names have been sold off at the same time that oil's trading for $25 a barrel. So the input costs are significantly lowered. I finally heard an analyst on Bloomberg this week talking about large miners being a bargain and one of the sectors that could potentially rebound on the other side of this. And so I've been encouraged and also a bit defensive, right? Because I've seen a lot of people sort of wanting to maybe sneer or point to gold as not skyrocketing immediately, as that it's not a safe haven anymore. And there's no room for that. It's just simply not true. You just got to look at the chart, right?
Absolutely. So we now have officially QE till infinity. I think we're all in agreement there. I don't think that the Fed at this point, or the ECB or the BOJ, I don't think any of them are hiding it at this point. What do you think that unemployment number is going to look like on Thursday? And something else that really upset me was the fact that, you know, the administration was asking states to not report the unemployment numbers as they came in, that they wanted it to be, you know, kind of at their discretion, and they could tell everybody whenever they felt like it. I think that's bullshit. But what do you think those unemployment numbers are going to be? I mean, I was looking at Canada, and you know, Justin Trudeau announced that the government of Canada has received 500,000 applications for employment insurance. And that compares to 27,000 for the same week last year. So if I do a little math and I look and I say there's about 37.5 million people in Canada, and then I look at the US and there's about 331 million people here, that's about 4.4 million, 4.5 million here, about 5 million people. Is that the number we're going to see next week?
Like I said, restaurant reservations were down 90%. The lady that comes and cleans our house said pretty much every other house had canceled on her. I see desperation out there in local businesses. You know, Cheese Shop in downtown Spokane had to have a fire sale on all their perishable stuff. The restaurants are pleading for people to come get takeout. Certainly they don't have any wait staff and aren't carrying any wait staff. I've read story after story after story on Twitter of people getting laid off via text message, etc. So you are going to see, millions. I don't know if it's going to be 5 million, but it is going to be significant. And that's really what you got to be looking at now is the economic fallout from this virus, right? What it's put in place. We're going to be firmly in a bear market with a recession, and it's time to get defensive.
So our bond market was broken before all this started. Our municipalities were going under. And let's be clear, all this was broken beforehand, everyone. This is, like Nick said, this COVID-19 just highlights, the underlying systemic imbalances that existed. This just accelerated what was coming. But we're talking the bond market, municipal debt, the fixed income market, and corporate bond market. So all of it was a mirage. That's what I have to. That's the only conclusion, Nick, that I get when I look at where the money is going from the Fed, right? Where the printing press is allocating its capital. It was all broken. And yet we were at record highs. Why?
Oh, I mean,
gosh,
it seems so simple now for a lot of reasons. One, we didn't let anything fail the last time, right? And so we've gotten into this sort of quasi-capitalist, corporatist system where companies are perpetually bailed out and backstopped even when they make bad business decisions. And so for the past years, the Fed has backstopped the market, right? It's been the Fed put, and a lot of that money has gone into share buyback. So one that's being highlighted now is these companies come crawling for handouts, and I've been writing about buybacks for years. I mean, come on, this has been it's like the simplest thing, man.
That's why I sent you the question. Keep going.
And it reduces the share count, so the CEOs get bigger bonuses, but it doesn't really increase profits overall. It just increased profits per share. And so if you look at a chart of total profits of the S&P, we were already going down. It was just a mirage EPS non-GAAP accounting practice mirage. Like you said, it's always been that. It's just always been that. And like you asked me months ago, did you just want to light the match? And it's like, yeah, well, guess what? Now the match is lit and you're seeing it. And gosh, I don't know. I was standing washing the dishes last night telling my wife Warren Buffett quotes, and I said, like he said, you only find out who's swimming naked when the tide goes out. And guess what? The water is rushing out.
Absolutely. Let's talk the airlines, which is kind of where I was leading you to with that question. There was a graphic that I saw a few days ago. The same airlines that are now threatening, and this is Delta and United as of the last hour, threatening massive cuts and layoffs if they're not given billions of dollars in bailout money again. These airlines... Give the
bailouts to the people. Now you're going to get me pissed off.
That's exactly what I wanted. I'm going to give you the number, and I know you already know it, but you're going exactly where I was going. 96% of free cash flow for, I believe, 6 of the major airlines for the past decade or so.
That's right.
Was spent buying their own shares back, right? In buybacks. 96%. And just explain to people, for people that aren't familiar with the mechanics of this, Nick, what happens when a company like United uses all of its free cash flow to buy their shares back? Why would a CEO do that?
Well, I sort of just explained it. When you buy back your own shares, you reduce. It all comes back to share structure, right, Gerardo? We always talk about share structure. You reduce the amount of outstanding shares, and so when you divide the profits you're making by fewer shares, you get a higher profit per share, an EPS number, earnings per share. And when your CEO and other executives are compensated and are incented on getting bigger bonuses based on not overall earnings, but earnings per share, then their only incentive is to increase the earnings per share. And one way to do that is through getting cheap money from the Federal Reserve policies that have been in place for years, to use that cheap money to buy back your shares, to reduce the share count, to increase the earnings per share, to get your bonus, not to reinvest in your company, not to give your employees benefits, not to increase productivity, not to build a better mousetrap, but simply to like you said, basically create a mirage to increase your wallet, right? Greed. And then, and now I'm just going to talk about the airlines, because these are the folks that have been nickel and diming you for 20 years now, right? Incrementally
I'm 5'6"
taking away.
and I can't stretch out.
incrementally taking away your leg space, parsing up the ticket sales into a caste system where the lowest rungs of the ladder don't even get to pick their seat anymore, splitting up families because they can't afford that next tier up in the thing, charging you exorbitant fees for everything from using a pair of headphones to bringing a bag on the plane. We've known that for years, and I've written about this too, airlines don't make money from selling tickets, but from fees. Like the majority of their profits come from fees anyway. And so you have this industry that is just mistreated the public for years as customers, charging fees to cancel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Choose your gripe with the airlines. And then on the financial side has been engineering it so that their executives are getting bonuses. Now comes crawling to Congress and wanting a bailout for their company. No, Jack. We did this with the banks in 2008, and I hope people don't stand for it this time around. If we're given bailouts, it should go directly to the employees. 2, why can't they sell equity at lower prices like every other company has to do, right? I've been reading a lot more about that.
Sell the shares they bought back.
Exactly right. Or if the government is going to step in and start buying equities, which Mr. Trump said he was in favor of this week, then guess what? I think U.S. citizens need to become shareholders of those companies.
Absolutely.
On a pro rata basis.
Absolutely. And that was my point. Why not give it to the people then? The same people that Delta and United is using as a threat, we'll cut them off. We'll fire them. We'll reduce our payroll by 60%. I say you let them do it. I say you let them do it. You let them go bankrupt. I say if the government's going to step in and spend the trillions of dollars that it's saying it's putting together in bailouts and tax breaks and checks, let's give it directly to the people that when this is all said and done can then go back out and spend money into the economy that we're going to have to revive because it's at a standstill right now. But let's at the very least have the decency as a country to get people through the next couple of months, because the next couple of months are going to be absolutely tough. I don't need United or Delta or whatever airline is threatening to go bankrupt to get Boeing. Are you serious? I think Boeing execs should be in jail. We've talked about this on the podcast months ago. Now we're considering bailing them out, giving them billions of dollars. And then on top of that, you mean to tell me that this administration wants to come in right behind the bailout and take direct equity stakes in these companies and start buying assets in the open market? Come on, folks. This is not a case study into uncharted waters. We can see what happens when that happens. Look at the Bank of Japan. Look at Europe. They've already done this. What happens when we go to 0% rates? And some markets are already negative here in the U.S. But what happens when we go to 0% rates here in the U.S.? We're not able to revive the economy the way we thought we were going to. Unemployment continues to rise. But somehow inflation continues to get out of hand because of all the extra liquidity in all the wrong places. And the Fed is out of ammo. That's what happens. Silent.
I've heard more than one person talk about depression this week, Gerardo.
Correct.
And hyperinflation, which I had to mention as well this week in my letter. I mean, those are two words that you should not be taking lightly. Depression and hyperinflation. That's a lot of money sloshing around in the system. The New York Times business editor, Andrew Sorkin, was writing about giving $10 trillion in no interest loans. That's half the GDP, Gerardo.
Mm-hmm. That's how great resets happen, everyone. And again, I spoke with a couple of gentlemen this week, and I don't like to name drop typically, but these are people that have seen multiple cycles. One was Jeff Phillips, a friend and mentor of ours, Nick, and then another one is Mr. Rick Rule that I know you're friendly with and was generous with his time with me today, and obviously someone that Jeff is very familiar with, and to a larger extent mentored him a bit, and so both of them were of the same opinion. This is how these things really bring in paradigm shifts. But the one thing they both said to me, and this was interesting, and I don't disagree, and again, they've seen more cycles than I have. They both said they believed that the Fed and central banks had the ability to paper this up, right? To mop it up with counterfeit money, as Mr. Rule likes to say, that they may be able to stall this for a couple of years. And again, if that is the case, either scenario, folks, either scenario, whether we get a great reset next month or next year or 4 years from now, either scenario is extremely beneficial to gold, because you can't do with gold what every central bank in the world is doing: counterfeiting the money. Do you disagree with that, Nick?
No, I don't think it's a secret how I think this is going to play out. I've got a video circulating out there right now suggesting that gold is going to be a very real part of the solution to all this. There's not enough gold for a gold-backed currency, of course, but, there can be a system set up where it's fractional, etc. And plus it just remains the non-dilutable, non-printable store of value. And so, take whoever's number you want. Goldman Sachs 1800, Jim Rickards 5000, whatever it is, higher gold prices are coming. And that's why when we talk about being down, and I heard you talking with Joe Mazumdar about it this week, and I know Rick talks about it a lot as well, being down 50-60% on these positions that we know are quality speculations on the gold space is okay, and as we often know, have turned out to go up significantly in past cycles after being down that much. And so the volatility is real. And that's something, I started talking to you about Hedge Eye this week, and that's something that I've really learned a lot more about through listening to Keith McCullough, is the volatility of things, right? Not just the price action and the volume action, but the specific volatility, and not just the volatility of the market, but the volatility of the specific commodity, the volatility of gold, the volatility of oil, right? And all those have just been off the charts, but you're starting to see them come down a little bit now, and so there'll be another side to this, and as I said, gold will be there.
There's some positive out of all this. You and I spoke and earlier in the week, and we talked about how we both feel, I think, that at the end of this there's going to be a greater sense of community, because the bottom line, folks, is that we're going to have to look out for those that aren't as fortunate as we are, that aren't healthy, that aren't, able to withstand months of, a depression like, or let's not even, be hyperbolic here, a recession, a severe recession that is absolutely priced in the cards now. And then there are some people that deserve all the things, the stuff that I've seen from doctors, nurses, hospital personnel, grocery store clerks that are stocking the shelves, I mentioned them earlier, has been nothing short of the best of us, right? It's been absolutely great. You stepped up. I was obviously, I follow you and comment often on your Twitter post. One, because they're insightful and informative, and two, because they're often hilarious as well. So if you're not familiar with Mr. Hodges' Twitter page, you should go check that out. But you talked about, there was a story out of Washington where, the bottom line is a lot of people weren't prepared for kids to stay home, and a lot of people have jobs, and a lot of people don't have daycare that they can afford. So what happens as far as food and care for those kids that are no longer able to count on the school district to provide meals in the morning and for lunch? And I would like to commend you, Nick, because I know you reached out, and you can explain the story here a bit better than I can because you did it. But I know that you reached out and made a donation and are looking to continue to do so. And I think you provided something like 5,000 meals. But can you explain the program? Can you explain what that entailed, and hopefully we can do more of that, the community that is able to, right?
Well, there's a whole lot going on. I mean, we're seeing, like I said was going to happen, millennials band together to create solutions. And so I've seen like millennials using technology to create meal delivery services for senior citizens in New York City. I've told you about the guy who was using in Italy the 3D printer to make the respirator parts. And so, yes, a greater sense of community for sure. And, what's funny is I see some hot takes that are saying as much, and they don't know it's a fourth turning. And I just have to smile inside because they think they're coming up with something new, seeing it in real time. But you just have to look back to the World War II, like Rosie the Riveter, and what happened with all that, and how businesses shifted to making things to support the war effort, et cetera. And it's going to be reflected again. I mean, I don't know how else to say that. That is what it is. And I've seen the same thing. A college roommate of mine is a doctor in New York City. His nurse is a wife. Or his wife is a nurse, excuse me, and they're putting in 18-hour days, right? They're on the front lines of it, and so millennials there again, and so fully fourth turning crisis stuff, right? And now you're seeing Ray Dalio use the word crisis, et cetera. What you're talking about here in Spokane is exactly what you said. There was no one prepared for these kids to be out of school. Low-income kids typically get breakfast and lunch in school. And so earlier this week was the first day that they were out of school without breakfast and lunch. And the school system provided, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I think they provided something like 16,000 meals, and the school system staff provided another couple thousand meals, and it still wasn't enough. And that was on the very first day. And I was like, man, this is the first day. How the hell are we going to get through? You and I are just talking about recession and 2-month shutdown. These kids didn't have enough to eat on the first day. My wife starts crying. And so I get on the horn and I'm like, hey, how can I help? I get a hold of the guy who's the nutrition director, and he says he thinks that they got it handled day to day for the kids, but they're really worried about them not having anything to eat on the weekends. And he tells me that organization called Second Harvest provides the weekend meals. I get a hold of Second Harvest. They have a donation program that levers 1 to 5. So you give $1, you buy 5 meals. I gave him $1,000 for 5,000 meals. We'll see how that plays out. I'll readdress next week, but you're going to have to do what you can. I mean, it's not, help somebody you see in the grocery store. My wife was saying there was this old lady in the grocery store kind of confused, not finding what she needed the other day. Just help her out. I mean, it's going to take stuff like that. This is literally, it sounds like a broken record, but it's unprecedented. You just said that people that have seen 3-4 cycles are saying this is the craziest one ever. The Dow market just went down the fastest it's ever gone down. And not everybody is in a position where they can just sit there and weather it, right? There's people that are already out of food, right? So things to do for sure.
Commendable on your part, Nick. Keep that up. And and then there's the other side, right? Where one of the comments, and I know I should never read the comments. Like, my brother's a journalist. And
I saw it.
He's told me time and over again, and I was so close. But I didn't want to be disrespectful to your feed, so I left it alone. But what happens immediately after, you asked a simple question, how can I help? And this fucker has the nerve, and let's just say he was a bot, because that allows me to not want to make it a real personal thing and just figure out who the hell this person is. But, the question is, or the comment made was, why don't their parents provide for them? And again, if you are that person on Twitter right now, people, 1, unfollow. 2, don't listen or subscribe to anything. 3, just fuck off. If you're not helping right now, if you're not helping, I mean, we could have a debate about policy and administrations and what party you like and what party you don't, and why this and why that. When the conversation is just about one private individual trying to help other individuals, and the only thing that you have to add or contribute to that conversation is, why doesn't someone else do it? Just fuck off. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, it's hungry kids. That's it.
That's it.
And so let me tell you about.
Are you going to tell me a nice story to make me smile?
Yeah, I got to do it. I meant to do it before anyway, because
good. I'm glad you saved it.
how young people are getting together and making things happen. So have you seen the strippers in Portland? Have you heard about them? You're going to love this.
I've seen them years ago, but not recently.
No, I mean what they're doing now. So the strip clubs, I haven't had the pleasure.
It's been a while.
So the strip clubs are shut down, obviously. No one's congregating there. And the strippers are out of work, just like the restaurant workers are out of work. So one strip club in Portland has, done what is necessary in these trying times and used ingenuity to invent a new product. And we know restaurants are also shut down and people are in their homes and they need food to be brought to them. And who better to bring you a meal from a local Portland restaurant than one of your local strippers, right?
I love it.
And so there is now a meal delivery service in Portland where you can hire a stripper to bring your meal to your door. And the company appropriately is called Boober Eats.
You sure know how to make a guy smile, Nick. Can we talk base metals and silver real quick? Which silver is trading like a base metal right now. It is trading like an industrial metal. I wrote, and I've tweeted several times, I was never convinced about silver's rally. I am convinced about gold's. But silver touched the 11-something mark. And you couldn't find anything from what I hear from dealers, right? They said you couldn't find anything for less than $15 an ounce of silver. But I mean, it got pretty extreme here the last few days. Base metals, copper fell below $2 a pound, closed at $2.16, $2.17 today. But, again, this is for every company out there that's producing and selling into this market. This is below the cost of production for most companies. Not sustainable. I agree that, it's prime time for gold right now and the gold stocks will be next. I agree with that sentiment. But if you have a time horizon and can withstand another 20 or 30% drop in these stocks, and you have a time horizon of years, not days or weeks or months, and can stomach the volatility, that frankly the Dow's providing you anyway, and any ETF that you may have owned. There's a lot of names that are attractive as all hell. I put on a trade earlier this week that finally filled a bid on Trilogy Metals, right? At I think $1.45 Canadian. And we'll see how that turns out. I may be down on it for the next week or two, or maybe for the next month. But, with the kind of financial backing and liquidity they have, that's a project that's not looking to be put into production for another 3 or 4 years, right? When I believe, copper is going to be twice or 3 times as at what it is right now. And so companies like a Trilogy that have the liquidity, that don't have to go back to the market, that are in a stable jurisdiction like Alaska, I think they have a ton of upside if you're able to be patient and if you don't mind seeing your portfolio down, 20 or 30%, which look, the bottom line is, most of the stuff that I'm in right now is down at least 40, 50%. The last week or two has not done that portfolio any favors, though I will say there's some names that are actually up this week. I know we're coming off a brutal sell-off last week as well, but I actually do see that some of the better quality names are starting to bottom. Let's see if that holds up. Any thoughts on where we are in the bottoming process for the better gold names, and then your thoughts on silver and the base metals? I know you had the pleasure of interviewing Ben Simmons, and I re-listened to that you sent out this week, and this is a gentleman who him and his 4 buddies, if I remember correctly, not practically, literally invented the grading service that every coin that's worth its weight in silver or gold is graded upon, right? Can you talk to that market a bit, Nick, and what you think is happening there?
Oh man, gosh, you just asked me a lot of questions. I'm going to go in the order that I had it in. I'm going to go in the order that I had it in my head. Dr. Copper, I said if it went below $2 was saying something sinister, and so it's definitely portending something negative in the economy, which I think is easy to see. We were just talking about millions of jobless claims, and so that's what's being baked into copper. In the long term, we know it has to rise for the reasons that you just said. And so in real time last week, I told you I was buying Ivanhoe. That's one of the highest quality copper development stories in the world, with multiple assets. Um, what else? Rio has halted production at Kennecott. They had an earthquake there that didn't even make the news.
5.7 in Salt Lake City, and the world didn't really give a fuck.
Yeah. So Rio is really cheap and pays a dividend. I'm talking really big companies now, right? Teck has halted construction on Quebrada Blanca, and with their exposure to oil and coal, has just been absolutely thrown in a ditch and left to die. And analysts are still bullish, so Teck is a good name there. And then Hannon Metals, which seemingly everyone is getting a whiff of now, on the a complete opposite end, as far on the opposite end of the spectrum from like a Rio and a Teck as you could possibly get, right? On the exploration side. So that's copper. Silver, when the ratio touched 100, I thought it was good, but we're well above that now. It's broken down as an industrial metal, like you said, just like copper. But you can't get it. You can't get gold either, is something I wanted to point out, because I was queuing it up the other day to see what the deal was, and while gold was trading below 1490, 1485, you couldn't buy a single coin for less than $1,600. You could buy in bulk for in the high 15s, but you couldn't get a single coin for $1,600, and you certainly couldn't get it delivered to you the next day. Everybody is out a week or more, so the physical demand is real. The safe haven nature is real, and then the bottoming process you asked about is happening now. Stocks are starting to get upgraded. I saw Pretium got upgraded this week. I saw Kirkland Lake got upgraded this week. I talked earlier about how the input costs are going to be lower because of the fall off in oil, and they've all been just really whacked. Gosh, go buy Sibanye. We sold it a couple of months ago over $10, I think, and now it's below $5. So come on.
Yeah, I've looked at K92 multiple times as a trade and as something to hold on for a while, and the only thing that keeps me away from it, to be frank, is the perceived jurisdictional risk there. But it seems like that's bottomed. Great Bear today put in a good run here, the second half of the trading day, and that seems to have found some good support. So there's definitely some names out there that appear, and obviously everyone knows how fast things are moving. But again, this isn't a complete shock to anybody that's been listening to Nick or been reading my rants and my raves for the past 2 years about, geopolitical tremors everywhere and the volatility that was permanent and the way it was going to play out, and that, the treasury market would freeze up and that they would bail it out. All of these things are not things that caught us off guard. It didn't mean that our positions aren't down 40, 50, 60% in many cases. And that part of it right now doesn't feel good. But again, in the words of some of the better speculators in the history of this space, I'd rather be a little bit early and be down 50 and 60% for a couple of years than miss out on that 10-fold gain that would have been a 100-fold gain had I been in early enough, right? And so if you're fortunate enough, everyone, to average down into the better names, do what the billionaires, the great contrarians in the space are doing. Look at John Paulson and Midas Gold. Midas had set up a $35 million US financing that at least two other groups ended up walking away from. And he said, no problem, I'll take the whole thing. And he did so at like a 26% premium, give or take a few percentage points. And so John Paulson didn't write a $35 million check to make 7 cents on a penny stock. He's waiting for that gold bull market to really catch everyone's attention and sell it to you, for $1.50, $2, $2.50 a share, and maybe even backstop and finance the building of it, which, by the way, CEO Stephen Quinn has done in the past. He's built mines and transitioned them from bear markets to bull markets, done so successfully, and then sold those companies for billions of dollars. So this isn't again, this part of the cycle doesn't feel good right now, but these cycles, like you said earlier, talking about the fourth turning, Nick, this isn't something that we haven't seen. This isn't something that We don't have a playbook for. It's just there are some things that are new. The velocity of this is unlike any other cycle that I've read or studied before. But we should have known that. And again, to Nick's credit, and I'll toot my own horn a little bit on this part. We've been calling that. So again, doesn't excuse the price performance and how that feels right now. But yeah, I'd rather be a little bit early than a couple of months or years late. That's okay, and that's just my personal risk tolerance.
Exactly right. You make your money on the buy, like we said last week, and we say repeatedly that, at least the speculative side of these things, right? The exploration and even the developers like Midas, this is speculative risk capital where you go into it knowing that you could damn well lose it all, right? We always say don't put money in these positions, the speculative positions that you can't afford to live without. And that's why we can say we can stomach a 50 or 60% down, because we go into it knowing that we could come out 100% down, right? And that's why I feel bad when I hear people saying, I'm wiped out. And at some point you got to take a little bit of personal responsibility, right? And talk about, have a real honest conversation with yourself about how much you can truly afford to lose and what your risk appetite truly is.
Yeah, unpopular take, everyone. You should take all the personal responsibility, right? At the end of the day, you get ideas, you hear ideas. It's up to you to determine your risk tolerance, your risk profile, the assets you own, and why you're doing this. And look, at the end of the day, if you act on an idea and you make a lot of money from it, you don't split that with anyone, right? So let's hopefully that's another it's another aspect of this lockdown, this quarantine, this COVID-19 thing. I hope at the end of all of this, we all take a real hard look at ourselves and take accountability for how we prepare for things and how we treat others. And again, just personal responsibility on all fronts. Back to my statement about the gentleman that irked me so much on your Twitter page. It's if you want to provide 5,000 meals for people, well, how does that hurt anybody? Right? That's it.
No, and I get the personal responsibility, but emotions are running high, and whatever, man. If you can't, if you can't get behind giving kids that don't have food, then you got bigger issues in your life, man.
Yeah, you're a piece of shit and fuck off. But I wish you the best, and I hope it's something that you're able to sort out for yourself, whatever it is that causes you to be that person. So. Nick, that's all I got. We could go on forever. There's, it's a mess out there. When oil is sitting here under $20 a barrel, down 21% today, after being up 15% today. And again, yeah, you probably saw it earlier when it was up at 22, 23 a barrel, right? No, it's not at 24 anymore. It closed under 20. When we get to that at the end of an hour conversation, that's the velocity that we're dealing with and the volatility that we're dealing with. I'm going to end on my end of it with a positive about that velocity. I absolutely believe that the rebound in the equity market, in the major U.S. indices, in gold and the gold stocks, the better ones, I believe you're going to see the same type of velocity to the upside. It's just the new world that we're in with algorithmic trading. I know that the NYSE trading floor is keeping everyone home next week. It'll all be the bots and the algorithms that you're trading against. Be very careful, everybody. But again, the downside hasn't felt great. I was from 2016, other than the couple of month period where I first just got going, up until last month, has been tough. And it's been tough because everything was stuck in the mud. Exploration companies weren't exploring. Producers weren't really making money. That's all changed now. This is a new market that we have. Everything is happening quicker. So I say that to say, if you're sitting with a 401k and you're down 30, 35%, and you thought you were headed to Dow 40,000, be patient. It's coming. I can't tell you that happens next month or the month after that, but hopefully you have the time horizon to be able to stick around for the upside, because I think I think that's on its way back. Anything on your end, Nick?
No, that's it. Watch the news. Talk to people you trust. Maybe reach out to your neighbors. They're going to be important if things get really bad. Stay optimistic and enjoy spring. It's spring, for crying out loud.
Agreed. I know I said last point. One last point. This one's important. Commercial real estate. We're going to see mortgage rates drop. You know, the 10-year coming down tells me that I think the Fed's got a handle on at least being able to suppress rates. I don't think ultimately they're successful, but I do believe they'll be able to suppress rates, which probably means that mortgage rates will come down quite a bit from where they're at now. I think that spread between the 10 and the 30-year and a 30-year mortgage is going to tighten, and I think that'll mean lower rates for mortgage borrowers. If you are speculating in the commercial real estate space, please be careful. That is the space that I believe will be hit the hardest first, as a result of the economy, basically coming to a standstill. So whether you're here in the US or you're in Mexico, or you're in Canada, wherever you're at, please, please, please do a lot of due diligence before you go thinking, hey, money's at 2.5%, 3%. Let me take this loan that I can lever up and I'll be okay because the money's so cheap. I think there's going to be some price discovery to be had there over the next year or so, and I think it's going to get pretty extreme, and there's going to be some great opportunities, but that particular aspect of the real estate market is the one that worries me the most. That's all.
You could see malls shut down. Nordstrom could go bye-bye.
Absolutely. So again, this is the price discovery part of the cycle, folks. It's not going to go naturally because of all the central bank interventions, but there will be ways to profit from this. And in the meantime, like Nick said, be kind to each other, help your neighbor out. It's a time to come together. And, at the end of this, I think we come out with a better system in place a little bit at a time. Nick, thank you so much for the input. Keep helping where you can. I know that's something that's important to you and your family. And if anybody out there has any questions, please reach out to us via Twitter or email. All questions are always welcome. I'm Gerardo Del Real, along with Mr. Nick Hodge. This was episode 62 of Bizarro World. Be safe, everyone.
See ya.